You're watching the Fox 9 Buzz.
With the Twin Cities Marathon approaching, many people are finishing their training routine while some others maybe just be starting for a run, but there's some common injuries runners face. We'll find those out coming up next.
Yeah, and we are less than 2 weeks away from the Twin Cities Marathon, and this year marks the 35th anniversary of the race.
Yeah, and whether you're running in the race or just a casual runner in general, injuries are pretty common. Here to talk about ways to avoid some injuries and the best ways to heal from them is Dr. Paul Langer from Twin Cities Orthopedics. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First off, obviously, injuries are very common just about in every aspect of any sort of physical activity. What are the most common injuries you see in terms of running?
Well, with running, by far the most common injury is to the knee, patellofemoral pain, and there's a number of different things that can cause pain there. But also we see a lot of tendon injuries, Achilles tendon, hamstring injuries, soft tissue injuries like iliotibial band syndrome, and foot injuries, especially things like plantar fasciitis, which causes heel pain.
So this is a huge running town. I mean, so many people, whether maybe not necessarily doing marathons all the time, but a lot of people are out running around. What are some of the mistakes that runners make that would, potentially let them be a little bit more vulnerable to injuries?
Well, most running injuries are caused by training errors. And so that can mean things like increasing mileage too quickly, doing too hard of a workout without allowing adequate recovery, not cross-training to promote other kind of development of muscles and movement patterns. And we do see people kind of ignoring warning signs once in a while too. So if you do one sport exclusively, you're more likely to get injured, whether that's running or basketball. So playing other sports, doing other activities so that you can still get fitness without doing just the same thing over and over. It's important to kind of mix it up a little bit and then just listen to warning signs. Our bodies need time to recover from stresses and strains and impacts.
Why is it that if you only do one sport, you're more prone to injury? Because if natural thought would say, oh, I've run a lot, then I should be good to go and healthy and not get injured all the time.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, it's the repetition. So most injuries that we see with running are called overuse injuries. So they're not fractures, they're not sprains, although those can happen. But so it's the repetition, and running is very monotonous. There's 1,000 to 1,500 footsteps per mile. We land with 2.5 to 3 times our body weight on every single footstep, and we run relatively straight lines at relatively constant paces. So our bodies have the same stresses, step after step, run after run. If you mix it up, in fact, there's studies that show if runners play ball sports, soccer, basketball, volleyball, they're less likely to get injured. And it's because there's different movement patterns, different stresses and strains. So our bodies are good at maintaining or building strength based on a movement pattern, but we build better variety of movement into our workouts that will help us avoid injury.
You said listening to your body. Obviously you hear, run through the pain or play through the pain. You hear about that all the time. When do you know that this is something that's pretty significant, or when is it just, okay, my body is getting to that point where, especially if you're running a marathon, your body's going to hurt. If you're training that much, it's going to hurt. When is it too much?
Yeah, and that's a good question. In fact, I had a question like that this morning before I came in here from clinic. I have a runner who's planning on running the race on next week, and he was worried he had a stress fracture. So I did an exam, took x-rays. He doesn't have a stress fracture, but I did warn him that because of all the miles on race day, 26.2, he might feel great at the start line, but that injury might start to kind of bother you as the race goes on. So some red flags that we look for are if they have pain walking, it's not likely they're going to be able to run without pain. And if they have pain that causes them to run differently. So this runner this morning said, I'm running with my foot planted this way so it doesn't hurt so much. So if you alter your movement pattern to minimize pain, one, you're going to develop a new injury most likely, and two, you're certainly going to progress that other one. So it's hard to know, and we have to do this patient by patient, whether or not they're going to be able to get to the starting line, or if they get to the starting line but things don't feel so good at mile 20, we just try to educate them. Yeah, there's aches and pains, but if you're especially altering how you run because of the pain, you might want to shut it down.
Okay, last question, because we're almost out of time. For those that don't run marathons, like most of us don't, and want to get into running or want to increase mileage, what's the best way to get started, or the best advice you have for the beginner runner to say, hey, here's what you should do to prevent yourself from injury and get the most out of your run?
Yeah, the best thing is to just increase mileage gradually and allow your body to recover in between workouts. But it's also to work on fitness in other ways too. If you have a previous injury, whether it was related to running or not, make sure you address that because the risk factors might still be there. In fact, one of the biggest risk factors for getting injury is having had a previous injury. So if you're prone to knee pain, let's say from a soccer injury when you were a high school student, come in and see a specialist. And at Twin Cities Orthopedics, we have physical therapists and orthopedists and podiatrists where we can work with you to identify your weaknesses and then help you minimize the risk of injury going forward.
Cool.
Good info there.
Very good.
Thanks so much.
All right,
We
thank you.
appreciate it.